She thought she was being given a second chance. She didn't know she was being handed to danger. Elena arrived in the city with nothing, no money, no protection, only trust in the wrong hands. And that single mistake pulled her into a world where power hides behind smiles, and truth is easy to destroy. They called her a scandal. They called her a mystery. They turned her pain into headlines and fed it to the world. And what happened next will shock you. Elena Whitmore stood at the bus stop in her small village of Brambleford, clutching a faded brown suitcase that held everything she owned in the world. The early morning fog still hung over the cobblestone roads, wrapping the sleepy town in silence. Chickens wandered lazily near wooden fences. The scent of wet soil and firewood filled the air. This was the only life Elena had ever known. She was 20 years old, gentle-eyed, soft-spoken, and raised with the belief that family meant protection. That belief was the reason she was standing there now. Her Aunt Margaret had arrived from abroad just 2 weeks earlier, dressed in expensive coats and speaking with confidence that dazzled the entire village. She talked endlessly about opportunity. About Brooklyn. About jobs. About a better life. "You are too bright to waste your future here, Elena," Margaret had said, holding her hands warmly. "Come with me. I'll help you build something." Those words had planted hope where desperation once lived. Elena had lost both parents at 16. Since then, she survived by helping neighbors clean homes, selling vegetables, and sewing clothes. Life was honest, but harsh. When Margaret offered her escape, Elena didn't question it. She believed in blood. She believed in trust. Now, as the bus approached with a groan of old brakes, Elena swallowed her fear and climbed aboard. She didn't know that her life was about to break in ways she never imagined. Brooklyn was nothing like Brambleford. The noise hit her first. The traffic. The towering buildings. The sharp scent of gasoline and fast food. Everything moved too quickly. People didn't smile at strangers. No one greeted anyone. Margaret's apartment was small and dark, tucked between 2 aging buildings. The warmth Elena expected never came. The first night, Margaret's tone changed. "You'll be meeting someone tomorrow," she said coldly, scrolling on her phone. "A man. He'll pay well." Elena blinked. "For what job?" Margaret's eyes finally lifted. "Don't pretend to be naive." A cold weight settled in Elena's stomach. "I don't understand." Margaret sighed with annoyance. "You think life here is free. You owe me for the ticket. The food. The roof. You'll do what you must." The truth slammed into Elena like a wave. She had not been brought to work in a cafe. She had not been brought to babysit. She had been sold. Fear wrapped around her heart. That night, Elena didn't sleep. The next evening, when Margaret left to prepare the client, Elena did the only thing instinct allowed. She ran. The streets of Brooklyn were unforgiving after midnight. Neon lights flickered. Sirens echoed in the distance. Elena walked aimlessly, hugging her coat tightly around her thin frame. She didn't know where she was going, only that she could not go back. Tears blurred her vision. Her legs ached. Her chest felt too heavy. Her thoughts spiraled. Why did I trust her? Why did I leave home? What do I do now? She stepped onto the edge of the road, barely aware of the headlights approaching too fast. A sharp screech. A violent impact. Then darkness. When Elena opened her eyes again, everything was white. The ceiling. The sheets. The walls. A hospital. Her head throbbed. Her body felt weak. Machines beeped softly beside her. She tried to move but winced in pain. "You're awake." The voice was male. "Come." Deep. Elena turned her head slowly. A man stood near the window. Tall. Well-dressed even in exhaustion. Dark hair slightly unkempt. His face carried both refinement and sorrow. "I'm so sorry," he said gently. "I didn't see you step into the road in time." Fear rose in her chest. She tried to sit up. "Please. I'm not." "Easy," he said quickly, stepping closer. "You're safe. I called the ambulance. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. Tears gathered in her eyes. The man studied her with quiet concern. "My name is Adrian Leclerc." The name sounded expensive. Powerful. I'm Elena," she whispered. Adrian nodded. "The doctors say you'll recover fully. Just some bruising and exhaustion." Exhaustion. That word felt deeper than physical. She hesitated, then asked softly, "Why are you still here?" His jaw tightened briefly. "Because it was my fault you were hurt." Silence lingered. Elena noticed then the sadness behind his eyes. Not surface sadness. Deep, buried pain. The kind that lived with someone constantly. "I want to help you," he said. "If you have no one, no home. I can arrange something safe." The kindness felt unreal. Her guard lifted slowly. And for the first time since leaving her village, Elena cried openly. She told him everything. The village. The aunt. The betrayal. The streets. The fear. Adrian listened without interruption. Without judgment. When she finished, the room felt heavier but also strangely lighter. "No one deserves what happened to you," he said quietly. "No one." 3 weeks later, Elena stood at the gates of a mansion. Not a house. A mansion. Tall iron gates. Marble pillars. Gardens trimmed with perfection. "This is where I live," Adrian said, stepping out of the car. "You'll have your own room. No pressure. No expectations. Just safety." Elena stared in disbelief. You don't even know me." Adrian's expression softened. Sometimes helping one person is the only way to survive your own darkness. She didn't yet understand what he meant. But as the gates closed behind them, one chapter of Elena's life ended. And another began. A chapter filled with pain, healing, temptation, betrayal, and a love neither of them expected. The Leclerc estate was too quiet for Elena's heart. The mansion stood proudly in the hills just outside Brooklyn, a grand structure of white stone, tall glass windows, and iron balconies that overlooked acres of manicured gardens. From the outside, it looked like something from a fairy tale. Inside, however, the air felt heavy with loneliness. Elena learned that on her very first morning. She woke early, unsure if she was still dreaming. The guest bedroom she had been given was larger than any home she had ever stepped inside. The bed was wide and soft, the curtains a pale shade of gold, the carpet thick beneath her feet. There was even a small sitting area with armchairs and a bookshelf filled with novels she had never heard of. For a moment, she just stood there, overwhelmed. "This isn't my world," she thought. A gentle knock came at the door. She froze. "Miss Elena," a woman's voice called softly. "May I come in?" Elena opened the door cautiously. Standing there was a middle-aged woman with warm brown eyes and neatly tied hair. She wore a simple but elegant uniform. "My name is Clara," the woman said with a kind smile. "I'm the head housekeeper here." Elena nodded nervously. I'm Elena." Clara's smile softened. "I know. Mr. Leclerc told us you'd be staying." "Us? There are only a few of us who work here. The estate is large, but the staff is small." She paused, studying Elena gently. "You look like you've been through a storm." Elena didn't know how to respond to that. Clara gestured down the hallway. "Come. Let me show you around." The mansion felt endless. Clara guided Elena through long corridors lined with paintings, a massive library that smelled like old paper and leather, a dining hall with a table that could seat 20 people, and a kitchen larger than the entire house Elena had grown up in. "You won't be expected to do anything you're not comfortable with," Clara explained as they walked. "Mr. Leclerc only suggested that you could help with light tasks if you wished. To give you routine. To give you purpose. Like a maid?" Elena asked quietly. Clara shook her head. "No. Like family who wants to feel useful again." That word again. Family. It stirred something fragile in Elena's chest. Later that afternoon, Elena found Adrian in the greenhouse behind the mansion. He stood among rows of flowers, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands. For a billionaire, he didn't look like one at that moment. He looked human. "You have a greenhouse?" Elena asked softly. Adrian turned, surprised. Then he smiled faintly. "I forget sometimes how unusual this place is. It's beautiful." "So are they," he said, gesturing to the flowers. "But they're fragile, like most beautiful things." Elena hesitated. "Clara showed me around today." "She's been here longer than anyone else," Adrian said. "She's the closest thing I have to family now." The sadness in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Elena folded her hands together. "Why do you live in such a big place, with so few people?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Because noise reminds me of things I lost," he admitted finally. She didn't push. She could recognize pain when she heard it. It sounded like her own. Days turned into weeks. Elena settled into a gentle routine. She helped Clara in the kitchen, learned how to polish the grand furniture, watered plants in the garden, and occasionally assisted the estate's driver, Thomas, with organizing deliveries. No one treated her like she owed them anything. That confused her. In her old life, kindness always came with expectations. Here, it didn't. Adrian rarely spoke much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He often spent evenings in the library, staring at books without reading them. Elena began to notice how often he looked tired. How often his smile faded too quickly. One night, she found him sitting alone in the dining hall long after dinner had been cleared. A single glass of untouched wine sat in front of him. "You forgot to eat," she said gently. Adrian looked up slowly. "Did I? You've been sitting here for over an hour." He gave a weak smile. Time behaves differently when you're not really living. Elena took the seat across from him without thinking. "Why are you not living?" she asked softly. Adrian studied her face, as if deciding whether she was safe enough for truth. "I used to be engaged," he said quietly. Her name was Camille Laurent. The name sounded elegant. Powerful. Dangerous. We were together for years. She knew every part of my life. Or so I thought. Elena listened without interrupting. "She didn't love me," he continued. "She loved the life I could give her. The status. The influence. When she found someone who could offer more, she left." Pain flickered across his eyes. "She told the press I was cold. That I was broken. That I was impossible to love." Elena's chest tightened. "That's not true. You don't know me well enough to say that." "I know broken people," she replied softly. "They don't rescue strangers from the street." Adrian stared at her, caught off guard. Something shifted between them that night. Not romance. Not yet. But understanding. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, Margaret Whitmore stared at her phone in fury. Elena was gone. No money. No contact. No control. Weeks passed. Then months. And then, one evening, Margaret saw something on the television that made her blood run cold. A news segment. Billionaire Adrian Leclerc spotted attending charity event with mysterious young woman. The camera zoomed in briefly. Elena's face filled the screen. Alive. Safe. Beautiful. Margaret's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. "So," she whispered, "you survived." Back at the mansion, Elena stood on the balcony outside her room, unaware that her past was beginning to move again. She watched the city lights in the distance. She thought about Adrian's sadness. About the way he never laughed fully. About the way he always looked like he was waiting for disappointment. And somewhere in her chest, a feeling began to grow. Quiet. Dangerous. Uninvited. Love. But she didn't yet recognize it for what it was. Not yet. Spring arrived quietly at the Leclerc estate. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the garden paths, soft pink petals drifting through the air like whispered promises. The mansion, once so cold and distant to Elena, had begun to feel almost like home. Almost. 3 months had passed since the night of the accident. 3 months since Adrian Leclerc had stepped into her broken life and offered her safety when she had nothing. And in those 3 months, everything had changed. Elena had grown stronger. Her laughter, once rare, now echoed occasionally through the halls when Clara told one of her dry jokes. She had learned to bake warm bread in the kitchen, to arrange flowers in the sitting room, to organize the library in ways that made sense only to her. The staff had come to care for her deeply. Thomas often teased her like a younger sister. Clara watched her with quiet pride. And Adrian had changed too. He still carried sadness, but it no longer swallowed him whole. He began joining Elena for breakfast in the mornings. He started taking walks through the gardens in the evenings, sometimes inviting her along. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, and more personal. They spoke about everything. About her village in Brambleford and how the stars looked brighter there at night. About his childhood in Paris before his family relocated to New York. About books they both loved, music that soothed them, dreams they had never spoken aloud. Somewhere along the way, Elena realized something terrifying. She no longer felt grateful to Adrian. She felt attached. One evening, as golden light stretched across the sky, Elena and Adrian sat on a bench near the far end of the garden. A gentle breeze carried the scent of roses between them. "You're quieter than usual," Adrian observed. Elena smiled faintly. "Am I?" "You are." He glanced at her. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated. The truth trembled at the edge of her tongue. "Instead," she said, "do you ever think about starting over somewhere else? A new life. A new place." Adrian leaned back, staring up at the sky. "Every day." "What stops you?" He turned toward her slowly. "Fear." She met his gaze. Of what? Of believing in something again, he admitted. Of trusting happiness. Of needing someone. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Elena looked away, heart racing, because she knew, with a certainty that frightened her, that she already needed him. The next week brought something new. Public life. Adrian received an invitation to attend a high-profile charity gala in Manhattan. He had avoided such events for months, preferring isolation to scrutiny. But this time, after much thought, he accepted. You don't have to come, he told Elena gently. I know crowds can be overwhelming. Elena surprised herself by saying, I want to. And she meant it. On the night of the event, she barely recognized herself. Clara had helped her into a simple but elegant blue gown. Her hair was styled softly around her shoulders. When she stepped into the grand hall of the hotel beside Adrian, heads turned. Not because of her dress, but because of the way Adrian looked at her. The press noticed too. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed them. Who is she? New girlfriend. Leclerc's mystery woman. Elena tried to ignore it all, but the attention made her pulse race. At first, the evening passed peacefully. Adrian introduced her to business associates as a close friend. His hand occasionally brushed against hers, accidental but lingering. Each time, it sent warmth through her chest. Then the room shifted. The air changed. A hush rippled through the crowd. Adrian froze beside her. Elena followed his gaze. A woman had just entered the room. Tall, elegant, strikingly beautiful. Dark hair pulled back perfectly. Red lipstick. Confidence in every step. The entire room seemed to part for her. Camille, Adrian whispered under his breath. Elena's stomach tightened. Camille Laurent. The woman who had broken him. Camille's eyes scanned the room deliberately, until they landed on Adrian. A slow smile curved her lips. And then she walked toward them. Camille's presence was overwhelming. Up close, she was flawless. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Elena, assessing her like one might examine an object. Then she turned fully to Adrian. Adrian, she said smoothly. It's been far too long. Silence stretched. Adrian's voice was controlled. Camille. She smiled. You look better. I could say the same. Camille's eyes flicked again to Elena. And who is this? Elena straightened instinctively. Adrian hesitated only a second. Elena Whitmore. Ah, Camille said softly. No title. No surname of influence. The words were polite. The tone was not. Elena felt the insult clearly. She's important to me, Adrian said quietly. Something unreadable passed through Camille's eyes. How lovely, she replied smoothly. I do hope you're treating him well, Elena. Elena held her gaze. I try. Camille's smile sharpened slightly. Try harder. Adrian deserves stability. The implication was clear. You are temporary. I am not. Before Elena could respond, Camille turned back to Adrian. We should talk. Soon. Then she glided away, leaving silence in her wake. Elena exhaled slowly. Adrian's hands were clenched. She's intimidating, Elena admitted. Adrian looked at her with something like apology. She's dangerous. Camille did not waste time. The following morning, tabloids began circulating. Billionaire Adrian Leclerc moves on with mysterious girl. Who is Elena Whitmore? From where did she come? Camille sat in her penthouse apartment, scrolling through headlines with calm satisfaction. She looks ordinary, she murmured. Her assistant shifted uncomfortably. Do you want us to investigate her background? Camille's lips curved. No. I already know what I want. She leaned back in her chair, eyes cold. If she wants my life, Camille said softly, she'll have to survive my world. Back at the mansion, Elena read the headlines in stunned silence. Adrian found her in the sitting room, staring at the tablet. I should have protected you from this, he said quietly. Elena looked up. Is this what your life is always like? He nodded slightly. And Camille? She doesn't like losing, he admitted. A chill ran through Elena. For the first time since arriving at the estate, she felt unsafe again. Not because of where she was, but because of who had noticed her. And somewhere deep inside Elena, a realization took shape. She was no longer just a girl being sheltered by a kind man. She was becoming part of his world. A world where love was a weakness, and where enemies wore perfect smiles. The first rumor arrived quietly. It appeared in the corner of an online blog, buried beneath celebrity gossip and fashion headlines. Sources claim Adrian Leclerc's new companion may not be who she appears to be. Elena didn't see it at first. But Camille did. And when Camille noticed something, it never remained small for long. Life at the mansion shifted almost imperceptibly at first. A car that lingered too long near the gates. A stranger pretending to jog slowly past the entrance more than once. Phone calls that hung up when answered. Clara noticed. Thomas noticed. Even the usually unbothered security staff began increasing their patrols. Elena tried to pretend everything was normal. She still woke early. Still helped in the kitchen. Still arranged flowers in the sitting room. But a quiet tension wrapped itself around her chest, tightening more each day. Adrian noticed too. "You're not sleeping," he said one evening as they sat in the library. Elena looked up from the book she hadn't been reading. "I am." "You're lying." She gave him a small, tired smile. "I'm just adjusting." "To what?" he asked gently. "To being seen." The words felt heavier once spoken aloud. Adrian studied her for a long moment. "I never wanted you dragged into this. I chose to walk beside you," she reminded him softly. Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. The next headline wasn't so subtle. Questions arise about Elena Whitmore's past. This time, Elena saw it herself. Her hands trembled as she read the article. It didn't accuse her of anything yet. It didn't claim. It simply suggested. But suggestion was enough. "They're digging," she whispered. Clara took the tablet gently from her hands. "Let them dig. Truth survives." Elena wanted to believe that. But her truth was complicated. Her truth included Margaret. Brooklyn. The streets. The night she ran. The accident. Even though she had done nothing wrong, the shame still clung to her skin. And shame was what Camille was counting on. Camille sat across from her lawyer, perfectly composed. "Her background is vulnerable," the lawyer admitted after reviewing the private investigator's report. "But nothing illegal. No criminal history. No evidence of wrongdoing." Camille smiled faintly. "I don't need evidence. I need narrative." The lawyer hesitated. "You're suggesting we twist perception?" Camille's eyes were cold. "I'm suggesting we let the world draw its own conclusions." The third article hit like a blade. Anonymous source claims Leclerc's companion was spotted frequenting questionable areas of Brooklyn. Elena read the words over and over again. Questionable areas. They were talking about the night she had run. They were circling closer. Adrian found her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. "Elena," he said softly. She didn't turn. "They're turning my pain into entertainment," she whispered. Adrian sat beside her. "I won't let them hurt you." "You can't control the world," she said quietly. "No," he admitted. "But I can stand between you and it." She finally looked at him then. There was something in her eyes he had never seen before. Fear of losing him. Fear of being unworthy. Fear that the world would convince him she didn't belong. The breaking point came 2 days later. A reporter appeared at the gate. Then another. Then another. By evening, social media was filled with speculation. Where did Elena Whitmore really come from? Is she using Adrian Leclerc? Is this another gold digger story? Elena stopped checking after she saw the comments. They were cruel. Uninformed. Merciless. Camille watched the chaos unfold from her penthouse, glass of champagne in hand. "She's unraveling," her assistant reported. "Good," Camille replied calmly. "Pressure reveals weakness." "But what about Adrian?" Camille's gaze darkened. Adrian has always been predictable. When cornered, he retreats. When uncertain, he doubts. All I have to do is ensure the doubt points toward her. The doubt didn't come immediately. Adrian remained steady, protective, unwavering, until the night Elena overheard a conversation she was never meant to hear. She was walking past the study when she heard his voice. Low. Tense. "If more comes out, it could damage everything," Adrian was saying. Another voice responded quietly, his lawyer, Victor Hale. "We need to be prepared for worst-case scenarios. If the media proves she misrepresented her past." "I know," Adrian interrupted. Elena froze. Misrepresented. Worst case. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. She stepped back silently, retreating before either of them noticed. That night, she cried alone for the first time since arriving at the mansion. Not because of the press, but because a small, terrible voice inside her whispered, "What if he starts to believe them?" The next morning, the headline changed everything. Leaked tip: was Elena Whitmore sent to Brooklyn for work? The article didn't state it outright. It didn't need to. The implication was clear. Elena's hands shook as she read. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was an attack. Clara stormed into the room moments later. Elena, don't read that filth. But Elena had already seen it. Is this what they think I am? She whispered. Clara's eyes softened. It's what someone wants them to think. Elena swallowed hard. And what if Adrian begins to wonder too? Clara took her hands firmly. He knows you. Elena wanted to believe that. But doubt was contagious. And Camille had just released the infection. High above the city, Camille set her phone down after making her final call. The seed is planted, she murmured. Now we wait. She walked to her window, looking out over the skyline. You can play house for now, Elena Whitmore, she said softly. But fairy tales always end when the truth arrives. Back at the mansion, Elena stood by the window of her room, watching the world that had once terrified her now circle her like a predator. Her past was no longer behind her. It was catching up. And soon, it would collide with the one thing she was most afraid to lose. Adrian. The storm arrived the way all cruel things do, suddenly, violently, and without mercy. Elena woke to chaos. Shouting echoed from beyond the estate gates. Car engines idled outside for too long. The air itself felt different, heavy with something foreboding. She slipped out of bed and crossed to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see. Cameras. Microphones. Reporters. Dozens of them. Her heart dropped. What is happening? She whispered. A sharp knock came at her door. Before she could answer, Clara entered, her usually calm face pale. Elena, don't go outside today. Do you hear me? Elena turned slowly. Why are they here? Clara hesitated, and that hesitation told Elena everything. They published it, Clara said quietly. Published what? The full story they've been building toward. Clara handed her the tablet. The headline was impossible to miss. Exclusive. Leclerc's lover was allegedly brought to Brooklyn for sex work. Elena's breath vanished. She scrolled. The article was vile. It spoke of sources. It used words like escort, manipulator, opportunist. It twisted her trauma into spectacle. It claimed she had latched onto Adrian Leclerc through proximity and emotional manipulation. Her hands trembled violently. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was character assassination. They're calling me a liar, she whispered. Clara moved closer. They're calling you what Camille wants them to call you. Elena's eyes burned. And Adrian? Clara's expression softened with sorrow. He's in the study. With Victor. That answered enough. The study door was partially open. Elena hadn't meant to listen. But she heard her name. The board is concerned, Victor Hale was saying carefully. Investors are asking questions. Sponsors are uneasy. This could affect everything. Adrian's voice was tight. This isn't about them. With respect, Adrian, public perception matters. If the narrative becomes that you were manipulated by... Stop, Adrian snapped. Don't finish that sentence. Silence followed. Victor continued more gently. You need to think strategically. For now, distance might help. Temporarily. Just until this dies down. Distance. The word struck Elena like a physical blow. Adrian didn't respond immediately. That pause hurt more than anything else. Elena stepped away before they could notice her. Before Adrian could see the moment something inside her broke. She packed quietly. Not everything. Just the small things that had become hers. The notebook Clara gave her, the book Adrian had once recommended, a simple sweater that still smelled faintly of the garden. Her hands moved automatically. Her heart felt hollow. Clara found her halfway through. No, Clara said firmly. You're not leaving. Elena looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. He didn't defend me, Clara. Clara's voice softened. He's confused. Pressured. But that doesn't mean he's given up on you. Elena shook her head slowly. I heard silence where I needed certainty. Clara reached for her. Running will only make their lies feel true. Elena closed her eyes. Staying will destroy what little dignity I have left. The door opened behind them. Adrian stood there. Elena froze. His gaze fell to the suitcase. Something in his expression fractured. Where are you going? He asked quietly. She turned to face him fully. For the first time since I met you, she said softly, I don't know where I belong. Adrian stepped closer. You belong here. Do I? Her voice trembled despite her effort. Because your silence earlier suggested otherwise. His eyes darkened with regret. You heard that. I heard enough, she said. Not the words. The hesitation. Adrian looked genuinely pained. I was trying to protect you. By stepping away from me, she asked bitterly. No, he said quickly. By thinking through the storm instead of reacting inside it. Elena shook her head slowly. People like me don't survive storms by thinking. We survive by knowing who will hold on to us when the wind rises. Adrian's voice dropped. I would never let go of you. But you already started to, she whispered. Silence stretched painfully between them. Then she did the one thing she never thought she'd have the strength to do. She lifted the suitcase. I won't stay where I'm something to be managed, Elena said quietly. Or hidden. Or questioned. Elena. Thank you, she interrupted gently, for saving my life. Truly. Her voice broke. But I can't keep living it here. Tears filled Adrian's eyes, but he didn't stop her. And that was the deepest wound of all. The tabloids had a field day. Mystery girl disappears from Leclerc estate. Did she flee? Truth revealed. Camille read every headline with satisfaction. She ran, her assistant reported. Camille smiled slowly. Of course she did. Should we continue pushing? Camille lifted her glass. No need. She's already done the work for us. Elena didn't go far. She couldn't. She found a small room for rent on the edge of the city, paid with the modest savings she had quietly built from helping Clara and the staff over the months. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't safety. But it was hers. The first night alone was the hardest. No mansion silence. No Clara's warmth. No Adrian's quiet presence. Just the hum of traffic and the echo of everything she'd lost. She sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees to her chest. You survived worse, she whispered to herself. But this pain was different. This wasn't survival. This was heartbreak. Back at the mansion, Adrian stood in the same spot Elena had left from hours earlier. The suitcase gone. The air empty. Clara stood in the doorway, watching him quietly. You let her walk away, she said gently. Adrian's voice was hoarse. I thought giving her space would show respect. Clara shook her head slowly. When someone already feels unworthy, distance feels like confirmation. Regret carved itself deeply into Adrian's expression. Victor's words echoed uselessly in his mind. Distance might help. Be strategic. Manage perception. None of it mattered now. Because the one person who mattered was gone. And somewhere in the city, Camille Laurent smiled into the night. But she did not yet realize something crucial. Elena Whitmore had not left because she was weak. She had left because she was beginning to grow strong. And strong women, when pushed far enough, did not disappear quietly. They returned. The city did not soften for broken hearts. It did not pause for grief. It did not whisper comfort to the lonely. Brooklyn roared endlessly outside Elena Whitmore's tiny rented room, as if daring her to either rise or be swallowed whole. The first week alone was brutal. Her room was barely larger than the kitchen pantry back at the Leclerc estate. The bed creaked. The heater groaned. The window looked out onto a brick wall covered in peeling posters. There were no flowers here. No soft carpets. No comforting silence. Only reality. And yet, strangely, Elena welcomed it. Because this life, however difficult, belonged to her. Each morning, she woke before sunrise. She made a habit of walking the nearby streets, memorizing their rhythms. She visited small cafes and read job listings taped to windows. She asked questions. She listened. She learned. She refused to be invisible. One afternoon, inside a modest bakery tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore, she noticed a handwritten sign. Help wanted, morning shift. She hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The owner, a middle-aged woman with flour-dusted hands and tired eyes, looked up. You here for the job? Elena nodded. If it's still available. The woman studied her. Experience. Not professionally, Elena admitted. But I learn quickly. And I work hard. Something in her honesty must have struck a chord. The woman sighed. Name's Sofia Romano. Be here tomorrow at 6. Just like that, Elena had her first job. The bakery became her sanctuary. The scent of fresh bread grounded her. The early mornings gave her routine. The customers, regulars who smiled, who said good morning, who didn't know her story, reminded her that she was more than headlines. Sofia was stern but fair. You don't need to explain your past here, she told Elena one morning while kneading dough. Everyone's running from something. What matters is where you run toward. Those words stayed with Elena. Slowly, her confidence returned. She began to stand taller, speak clearer, laugh occasionally. But nights were harder, because nights belonged to memory. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the greenhouse, the library, the way Adrian's voice softened when he said her name. She missed him. And that was the hardest truth of all. Across the city, Adrian Leclerc unraveled. The mansion felt cavernous without Elena's presence. The gardens lost their color. The library sat untouched. Even the staff moved more quietly, as if afraid to disturb the ghost she'd left behind. Adrian stopped attending meetings. Missed calls. Ignored invitations. Victor grew increasingly concerned. "This cannot continue," Victor said firmly one afternoon. "You're losing focus. The board is uneasy." Adrian barely looked up. "Let them be uneasy. This is your empire we're talking about." Adrian's voice was hollow. "It's meaningless if I've destroyed the one thing that mattered." Victor hesitated. "You could reach out to her." "I don't deserve to." The words tasted like self-punishment. Clara, standing silently near the door, finally spoke. "Self-pity won't bring her back," she said gently. "Courage might." Adrian looked up slowly. Clara met his gaze steadily. "If you believe in her truth, then fight for it. Publicly. Without conditions." Camille, meanwhile, was enjoying the aftermath. With Elena gone, she began reappearing more frequently in Adrian's orbit. Charity events, business dinners, elite gatherings. Always polite. Always poised. Always concerned. She left because of the pressure, Camille would say to reporters with carefully measured sadness. "I only hope Adrian heals." The narrative was working. Public sympathy leaned toward her. Adrian noticed. And for the first time, instead of retreating, something inside him began to shift. He started to see the manipulation more clearly. The timing of the leaks. The subtle steering of public opinion. The way Camille's concern always benefited her image. Clara's words echoed in his mind. Fight for it. One rainy afternoon, Elena's life took another unexpected turn. The bakery was unusually busy when a woman in a tailored coat stepped inside, shaking rain from her umbrella. She stood out immediately, composed, observant, sharp-eyed. She watched Elena work for several minutes before approaching the counter. "You handle pressure well," the woman said calmly. Elena blinked. "I'm sorry. I've been observing," she said. "You're attentive, efficient, kind to customers." Elena smiled politely. "Thank you." The woman studied her face carefully. "My name is Isabel Morrow. I run a small nonprofit organization that helps vulnerable young women rebuild their lives." Something in Elena's chest tightened. "We operate shelters, job training programs, legal advocacy," Isabel continued. "And we're currently looking for a program assistant." Elena stared. "You don't know anything about me." Isabel's gaze was steady. "I know resilience when I see it." Elena hesitated. "Why are you telling me this?" Isabel slid a business card across the counter. "Because sometimes, the people who've survived the worst are the ones most qualified to help others survive too." Elena looked down at the card. Hope stirred. Real, cautious hope. That night, Elena sat on her bed holding Isabel's card between her fingers. Program assistant. Nonprofit. Helping others. It felt meaningful. For the first time in weeks, she didn't fall asleep feeling like she was running away from her past. She fell asleep imagining a future. Across town, Adrian stood in front of a mirror in his study, adjusting his jacket for the first time in days. Clara watched from the doorway. "Where are you going?" she asked gently. Adrian's eyes were steady now. "Determined. To correct a mistake," he said. "To fight for the truth." Clara smiled softly. Finally, and somewhere high above the city, Camille Laurent reviewed another glowing article praising her elegance, her patience, her supposed devotion. She sipped her wine leisurely, unaware that beneath the calm surface, the tides were shifting. Unaware that the woman she thought she had destroyed was rising quietly, steadily, into something stronger. And unaware that Adrian Leclerc was no longer willing to play the role Camille had written for him. The game was changing. Elena Whitmore sat in the small interview room of the nonprofit's office, hands folded tightly in her lap. The space was modest, plain white walls, second-hand furniture, shelves lined with donated books, but it radiated warmth. Sunlight filtered through wide windows. On the far wall, a simple poster read, You are not your past. She stared at those words, letting them settle into places inside her that still felt tender. Across from her, Isabel Moreau reviewed a folder quietly. I want you to understand something, Isabel said at last. This is not a charity hire. If you work here, it's because you are capable. Elena nodded. I understand. Isabel studied her for a moment. Tell me why you want this position. Elena hesitated only briefly. Because I know what it feels like to be tricked into a situation you didn't choose. To feel voiceless. To feel disposable. Her voice remained steady. And because I don't want other girls to feel as alone as I did. Isabel closed the folder slowly. You start Monday, she said. Elena blinked. That's it. That's enough, Isabel replied simply. And just like that, another door opened. The nonprofit, called Aurora House, became Elena's new world. She assisted with organizing resources, helping manage intake for new arrivals, and accompanying Isabel to community outreach events. She listened to stories, raw, heartbreaking stories, from girls and young women who had endured betrayal, abuse, exploitation, and neglect. And for the first time, her own pain felt purposeful. You understand them in a way others can't, Isabel observed one afternoon. Elena looked up from a stack of paperwork. Because I've been close to their world. Because you've survived it, Isabel corrected gently. The difference mattered. Word spread quickly among the women at Aurora House. They trusted Elena. Confided in her. Looked to her for reassurance. You make me feel like I'm not broken, one girl told her quietly. Elena swallowed hard. You're not broken, she replied. You're healing. She realized then that she was saying those words to herself too. Meanwhile, the public narrative continued spinning out of control. But something unexpected began to shift. An investigative journalist named Oliver Grant started asking different questions. Why had the first source been anonymous? Why did the timeline of leaks align so precisely with Camille Laurent's reappearance? Why had no actual evidence been presented? Oliver began digging. And what he uncovered made his stomach turn. Adrian stood at the podium of a crowded press conference, cameras flashing relentlessly. The room buzzed with anticipation. No one had seen him speak publicly in weeks. Victor stood nearby, nervous but prepared. Clara watched from the side, heart pounding with cautious hope. Adrian adjusted the microphone. His voice, when he spoke, was calm. Clear. Unshaken. I have spent the past months silent, he began. Not because I doubted the woman at the center of these rumors, but because I underestimated how dangerous silence could be. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena Whitmore is not a scandal, Adrian continued. She is not a story to be twisted for entertainment. She is a survivor of betrayal, and the only shame belongs to those who have exploited her pain. Cameras flashed more intensely now. I believe her. Fully. Without condition. And I will not allow her name to be used as a weapon ever again. The room erupted with questions. But Adrian wasn't finished. There has been deliberate manipulation of public narrative, he added carefully. And those responsible will be held accountable. He didn't say Camille's name. He didn't need to. The implication was thunderous. Camille watched the press conference from her penthouse, expression frozen. Her assistant shifted nervously. He's turning this around. Camille's jaw tightened. Not for long. But for the first time since she began this game, uncertainty flickered behind her eyes. Because Adrian was no longer reacting. He was acting. The real turning point came days later. Oliver Grant's exposé dropped. Headline: The Manufactured Scandal, How Public Perception Was Manipulated in the Leclerc Affair. The article was meticulous. Evidence-based. Damning. It traced anonymous tips to a PR firm Camille had quietly hired. It exposed timing patterns. It highlighted inconsistencies. It quoted insiders. It didn't accuse outright. It didn't need to. The truth was clear between every line. Social media erupted, but this time, the tone was different. Support replaced suspicion. Outrage replaced mockery. Sympathy replaced cruelty. And at the center of it all was Elena Whitmore's name, now spoken with respect. Elena found out by accident. She was sorting donations at Aurora House when a volunteer rushed in, phone in hand. Elena, have you seen this? She hesitated before taking the phone. Then she read. Every word. Her hands trembled, but not with fear this time. With release. Isabel appeared beside her, reading silently over her shoulder. They tried to erase you, Isabel said softly. They failed. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. He defended me. Isabel glanced at her carefully. Did you doubt he would? Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. That evening, Elena stood on the rooftop of her building, city lights stretching endlessly around her. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. Her phone buzzed softly in her hand. A single new message. Unknown number. Elena, it's Adrian. Her heart stopped. I don't know if you'll want to hear from me. But I owe you more than silence. More than distance. More than fear. She stared at the screen, breath unsteady. Another message appeared. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Only for the chance to apologize in person. If you ever choose to allow that. Elena closed her eyes. The city hummed below. Her past stood behind her. Her future waited ahead. And somewhere between the two was choice. For the first time, the choice was hers. High above the skyline, Camille Laurent read Oliver Grant's article with rigid composure. Her assistant watched nervously. This is bad. Camille set the tablet down slowly. Yes, she said quietly. It is. Her gaze moved toward the city beyond her window. But unlike before, there was no smile. Only calculation. Because Camille Laurent was not finished yet. Elena didn't reply to Adrian's messages that night. Not because she didn't want to, but because some emotions were too fragile to touch in the dark. She needed daylight. Clarity. Strength. So she let the phone rest on the windowsill, lay on her bed fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling while the city murmured around her. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it carried no nightmares, only questions. By morning, one thing was clear. She could no longer pretend her heart was untouched. Aurora House buzzed with energy the next day. Volunteers talked excitedly about the exposé. New donors had reached out overnight. Offers of support poured in through emails and social media. This could change everything for us, Isabel said, scanning her inbox. More funding. More visibility. More lives helped. Elena smiled faintly. It's a good thing. It's more than that, Isabel said gently. It's momentum. Elena knew what she meant. Momentum for the truth. Momentum for healing. Momentum for courage. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message. I will be at the Riverside Gallery this evening for the Youth Advocacy fundraiser. I'll understand if you don't come. But if you do, I'll be there. No pressure. No demand. Just an open door. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed a single word. Okay. The Riverside Gallery shimmered with soft lights and quiet elegance. Art pieces lined the walls, portraits, sculptures, photography, all centered around themes of survival, identity, and resilience. The event was dedicated to raising awareness and funding for organizations like Aurora House. Elena arrived alone. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, her hair loosely pinned back. Nothing extravagant. Nothing performative. Just herself. She almost turned back at the entrance. Almost. Then she saw him. Adrian stood near the far wall, speaking quietly with a donor. He looked different than he had months ago. Still polished. Still composed. But something else lived beneath the surface now. Humility. When his gaze found her across the room, everything else seemed to fade. He excused himself immediately and crossed toward her slowly, as though afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. Elena, he said softly. Adrian. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with everything unsaid. You came, he said. You asked, she replied simply. A faint smile touched his lips. Then faded. I owe you more than words, he said. But I'll start with them anyway. Elena studied his face carefully. Go on. I was afraid, Adrian admitted. Not of the world. Not of the press. But of failing you. Of choosing wrong again. And instead of being brave, I tried to be careful. His voice tightened. I hurt you by doing so. Elena's heart ached, but she didn't look away. You didn't just hurt me, she said quietly. You reminded me of every moment I ever felt disposable. Pain flickered openly in his eyes. I know. I needed certainty, she continued. Not protection. Not strategy. Certainty. Adrian nodded slowly. You deserved that. You still do. A pause. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. But I want you to know this, I believe you. I have always believed you. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that, if you ever allow me the chance. The sincerity in his voice left no room for performance. Elena exhaled slowly. I don't know what I'm ready for, she admitted. But I know I can't keep pretending I don't care. Hope flickered carefully in Adrian's expression. That's more than I deserve. Don't decide that for me, she said gently. And in that moment, something shifted. Not resolution. Not romance restored. But possibility. Across the room, Camille Laurent watched. She stood perfectly poised in a black gown, champagne in hand, eyes trained on the pair like a hawk. Her lips curved faintly. So, she murmured, you came after all. Her assistant leaned closer. Do you want to leave? Camille's gaze remained fixed. No. I want to finish this. She lifted her phone subtly and typed a message. A single message. Sent to a contact labeled Brooklyn Source. It's time. The evening's program began shortly after. Guests gathered near the small stage as the host introduced speakers who had experienced the realities the fundraiser sought to address. Isabel was scheduled to speak. So was Elena. She hadn't known that until Isabel told her minutes before. You don't have to, Isabel said gently. Elena looked at the stage. Looked at the crowd. Looked briefly at Adrian. Then she nodded. I want to. Elena stood at the podium, hands steady. Hundreds of eyes watched her. Cameras rolled quietly from the back. This is Elena Whitmore, the host announced warmly. A survivor. An advocate. And a powerful voice for the women we serve. Applause filled the room. Elena took a breath. When I first came to this city, she began, voice calm, I believed that trusting family meant safety. I was wrong. The room stilled. I was betrayed by someone who should have protected me. I was frightened. Homeless. Lost. But I was never what the rumors claimed I was. Her gaze moved briefly, unintentionally, toward Camille. Camille's eyes didn't flinch. I ran from danger, Elena continued. I survived an accident. I was given kindness by a stranger. And then I lost everything again when lies were louder than truth. Murmurs rippled. But I am still here, Elena said firmly. Not because of scandal, but because I refused to disappear. Applause erupted. Not polite. Not shallow. Real. Camille's fingers tightened slowly around her glass. Because the story was no longer hers to control. Not anymore. The applause for Elena lingered long after she stepped away from the podium. It wasn't polite applause. It wasn't charity applause. It was recognition. The kind that settles into the bones. Elena returned to her seat slowly, heart still pounding, hands warm from the echo of clapping. Adrian watched her as though he were seeing her for the first time all over again, not as someone he had rescued, but as someone who had risen entirely on her own strength. Isabel leaned toward her. You just changed more lives than you'll ever know, she whispered. Elena swallowed, emotion thick in her throat. Including my own. Across the room, Camille Laurent remained seated, perfectly composed on the outside. But beneath the silk and diamonds, her thoughts moved quickly. Too quickly. Elena had shifted the narrative. The crowd's sympathy had crystallized into loyalty. The press lenses were no longer hunting for scandal. They were capturing transformation. This was not the story Camille had written. Her phone vibrated softly. A single incoming message. Brooklyn Source, she's here. Camille's gaze darkened. Margaret Whitmore stood just outside the gallery doors, adjusting the collar of her coat. Time had not softened her. It had sharpened her. The city had been less generous to her than she had expected after Elena disappeared. Money dried up. Connections faded. The lifestyle she had built on manipulation collapsed more quickly than she had imagined. And then Camille's message arrived. I can give you everything back, it had said. All you have to do is tell the truth. Your version of it. Margaret smiled coldly at the memory. Truth had never been profitable. But performance? That paid well. She pushed open the doors. Inside, the final segment of the evening began, an open discussion about exploitation, power imbalance, and public accountability. Panelists took their seats on stage, including Isabel, a legal advocate, a former survivor, and unexpectedly, Adrian. A murmur rippled through the audience. Adrian accepted the microphone calmly. There is something I want to say, he began, voice steady. Not as a businessman. Not as a public figure. But as a man who failed someone when it mattered most. Elena's breath caught. I allowed fear of reputation to delay my defense of the woman I care about, Adrian continued. And in doing so, I caused harm. That is my responsibility. The room was silent. I will not repeat that mistake. Not with Elena. Not with anyone who has been silenced by power, money, or manipulation. Cameras flashed. This wasn't performance. This was accountability. And the world could feel the difference. Then the doors at the back of the room opened. Every head turned. Margaret Whitmore walked in slowly, deliberately. A stranger to most. But Elena recognized her instantly. The air left her lungs. Aunt Margaret. Her pulse thundered. Adrian turned too, confusion flickering briefly across his face. Camille, watching from her seat, allowed herself a faint, satisfied breath. Let the final act begin. Margaret's voice cut through the room before anyone could stop her. My name is Margaret Whitmore, she announced. And I believe the world deserves to hear the truth about Elena Whitmore. Gasps echoed. Security hesitated, unsure. Elena stood frozen. Margaret's gaze found her immediately. You ran from me, Margaret said sharply, stepping forward. You abandoned the opportunity one sacrificed everything to give you. The crowd murmured uneasily. Elena found her voice at last. You tried to sell me. A collective breath was drawn. Margaret scoffed. Dramatic exaggeration. Adrian stood immediately. Security. No, Isabel said quietly but firmly. Let her speak. The legal advocate beside her nodded. If she's making accusations publicly, she must be prepared to answer for them. Margaret hesitated slightly, then lifted her chin. I brought Elena to Brooklyn for work. That is the truth. She misunderstood. She panicked. She ran. That is not my crime. Elena's hands trembled, but she stepped forward slowly, standing just beside the stage. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. You told me I owed you, Elena said. You said I would meet men who would pay. You said I had no choice. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You were emotional. I was terrified. A hush fell. The legal advocate leaned toward the microphone. Ms. Whitmore, are you aware that coercion into sexual labor constitutes trafficking under the law? Margaret's composure faltered, just slightly. This is being twisted. But she never finished the sentence. Because at that moment, Oliver Grant's voice cut through the room. I believe I can clarify the situation. Heads turned. Oliver stood near the back, holding up his phone. I've spent months investigating the misinformation campaign surrounding Elena Whitmore, he said clearly, including tracing communications between anonymous sources and a private PR firm. He stepped forward, addressing the room and the cameras. One of those sources, he continued, was a woman by the name of Margaret Whitmore. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Margaret's face drained of color. Oliver held up printed documents now. Payment records. Message transcripts. Dates. All verified. Camille's fingers tightened around her glass. Too tight. Margaret stumbled backward. No, she manipulated. But her voice was drowned out by the sound of the room turning. Not against Elena. Against her. Adrian stepped forward then, placing himself beside Elena without hesitation this time. A silent statement. A public one. Elena looked up at him briefly. He didn't look away. The truth no longer stood between them. It stood with them. Cameras captured everything. The exposure. The betrayal. The accountability. The shift. By morning, the headlines had changed entirely. Scandal source exposed. Lies collapsed under evidence. Elena Whitmore vindicated. Manipulation, not romance, fueled Leclerc rumors. Public sentiment transformed overnight. But this time, it wasn't fickle. It was fierce. Protective. Camille Laurent stood alone in her penthouse, staring at the city through the glass. Her phone buzzed with notifications she did not open. Her name had begun trending. Not as a victim, but as a question. Her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar now. For the first time in a long while, uncertain. She had underestimated something. Not Elena's vulnerability, but her resilience. And resilience, once seen, could not be unseen. Back at the gallery, the room slowly emptied. Margaret had been escorted out. Reporters clustered outside. But inside, in the quiet aftermath, Elena stood still. Adrian remained beside her. I won't ask for anything tonight, he said softly. Not forgiveness. Not clarity. Just, thank you for letting me stand here with you. Elena studied his face. No excuses. No strategy. No performance. Just honesty. I didn't let you, she said gently. You chose to. Adrian nodded. I'm choosing you. Every time. If you'll ever allow me to. Elena exhaled slowly. Outside, the world buzzed. Inside, something peaceful settled. Not resolution yet. But the final walls between them had fallen. And far away, in the quiet of her modest room, Elena realized something profound. Her story was no longer defined by what had been done to her. It was defined by what she had survived. By what she had reclaimed. By who she had become. One final chapter remained. Not of pain, but of choice. Of love. Of home. The world did not calm down immediately after the truth came out. If anything, it grew louder. News channels replayed the footage from the gallery. Social media dissected every moment. Talk shows debated power, manipulation, forgiveness, and resilience. Elena Whitmore's name became a symbol, not of scandal, but of survival. Yet inside her small Brooklyn room, life remained simple. That contrast grounded her. She still woke early. Still walked to work. Still brewed tea slowly before leaving. Fame brushed past her life, but she refused to let it define her. Because healing, she had learned, required consistency, not attention. Aurora House flourished. Donations surged. Volunteers increased. New shelters opened. More young women found safety, counseling, and training. Isabel expanded the program, and Elena was formally promoted to program coordinator. "You've earned this," Isabel said warmly. Not because of publicity, but because of impact. Those words mattered. Elena poured herself into the work. She organized workshops, coordinated legal support, built partnerships. She spoke at universities. She attended community forums. She mentored girls who reminded her painfully of herself. And each time she shared her story, she reclaimed it a little more. Adrian did not push. That was his promise to himself. After the gallery night, he sent no barrage of messages. No dramatic gestures. No pressure. He showed up where it mattered, quietly. He donated anonymously to Aurora House. He used his influence to connect Isabel with funding networks. He publicly redirected interviews away from gossip and toward advocacy. And when Elena did reach out, sometimes with a simple update, sometimes with cautious warmth, he responded with patience. They rebuilt slowly, deliberately, carefully, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two people learning how to meet each other on equal ground. 6 months later, they sat across from each other in a small cafe by the river. Not a mansion, not a gala, not a battlefield, just coffee, sunlight, and honesty. "You look lighter," Adrian observed gently. Elena smiled. "I feel lighter." He hesitated. "And us?" She studied him quietly. "We are no longer a wound," she said at last. "We are a possibility." Adrian nodded, respecting the pace. "That's enough for me." And for the first time, Elena reached across the table and took his hand. Not because she needed him, but because she chose him. The proposal came quietly too. No cameras. No spectacle. No performance. Just one evening in the greenhouse she once loved so much. "I built so many walls after Camille," Adrian admitted softly. "You walked through them without force. Without demand. Without agenda." He knelt before her, holding a simple ring. "I don't want perfection," he said. "I want honesty. Partnership. Growth. Choice. Every day. With you." Tears filled Elena's eyes. Not from fear this time, but from certainty. "Yes," she whispered. "Not because I owe you, but because I choose you." And that difference meant everything. They married 1 year after the scandal. Not in a cathedral. Not before global press. But in the gardens of the Leclerc estate. Only close friends attended. Clara wept openly. Thomas clapped proudly. Isabel smiled with quiet joy. Elena wore a simple ivory dress. No diamonds. No extravagance. Just grace. When Adrian spoke his vows, his voice trembled. "You found me when I was lost," he said. "But more importantly, you found yourself. And you taught me that love is not possession. It is presence." Elena's voice was steady when she spoke. "I was sent to this city believing I had no choice," she said. "Today, I stand here because every step has been mine. Every healing. Every decision. Every love." Their kiss was not dramatic. It was peaceful. Earned. Weeks after the wedding, Elena made one final request. "I want to go home," she told Adrian softly. He understood immediately. Not Brooklyn home. Not mansion home. But Bramble Ford. Her village. The place she had been taken from. The place she had once left in fear. They traveled quietly. No entourage. No press. Just the two of them. The village had not changed much. Cobblestone roads. Wooden fences. Morning fog. The scent of wet soil. But Elena had. The neighbors recognized her slowly, then with astonishment. Whispers turned into tears. Tears turned into embraces. "You survived," one elderly woman murmured, holding her tightly. "Yes," Elena replied softly. "I did." She found the old cottage where she had grown up. The walls were worn. The roof sagged slightly. But it still felt like beginnings. With Adrian's support, but under Elena's direction, they rebuilt the home. Not into a mansion, but into something better. A community center. A place where young girls could learn skills. A place where women could seek safety. A place where dreams could be protected, not exploited. They named it the Whitmore Foundation. Not after scandal. Not after headlines. But after survival. At the opening ceremony, Elena stood before the villagers, sunlight warm on her face. "I was taken from here through deception," she said. "But I return with purpose. This place will ensure that no girl leaves this village believing her only value is what someone else can take from her." Applause echoed across the open field. Not polite. Not formal. But full of gratitude. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Elena and Adrian walked hand in hand along the familiar dirt path near her childhood home. "You were never broken," Adrian said quietly. Elena smiled. "I was fractured." He squeezed her hand gently. "But you rebuilt yourself." "Yes," she said. "And you learned to meet me without trying to save me." He looked at her with soft admiration. "The greatest lesson of my life." They stopped near the old oak tree she used to sit under as a girl. Elena looked out over the land. "This is where I began," she said. "This is where I was betrayed. This is where I was forgotten." She turned to Adrian. "And this is where I am finally whole." Years later, people would tell Elena's story across platforms, screens, classrooms, and quiet conversations. Not as gossip. Not as tragedy. But as testimony. Of survival. Of choice. Of dignity. Of love that grew only after self-worth was reclaimed. And every time someone asked her how she endured it all, Elena would answer simply, "I stopped waiting to be saved. And started choosing myself." And somewhere, always near her side, Adrian would stand, not as her savior, but as her partner, her witness, her home. The end.